Hello everyone, so this video will be about Rachmaninoff. I did one on Chopin, on Liszt, on Mozart. People asked me if I could do on Rachmaninoff, and I actually planned already to do Rachmaninoff. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot about Rachmaninoff's daily routine. There is only one little page here shortly explaining what he was doing, and he was kind of composing 3 hours in the morning, practicing 2 hours piano in the afternoon, and then having sometimes 4 hours left to composing in the afternoon. The nice thing with Rachmaninoff is he didn't start too early. He started at 9 because he was writing to a friend that he composed today from 9 to 12:30, and this was not enough. And then he's also mentioning that some pianists say they are slaves of their piano, and then he's just saying as a joke that if he's a slave, his master is quite nice because he thinks 2 hours is enough to practice in a day. But he composed a lot, so he composed around 7-8 hours a day, practiced 2 hours. I will come to the practice later, and he felt 2 hours was fine, but he felt 8 hours composer was not enough. So obviously he was maybe more a composer than a pianist, but he was an amazing pianist actually. I said he didn't start very early. That's a nice thing because then I don't have to imitate this and try to see, not like Liszt or something, waking up at 4. But then, interesting, funny story, I was looking a bit for information on internet and I found not much. I once read a very short biography of Rachmaninoff. I remember some stuff, but then I found out that actually he, at the beginning in his studies in the conservatory, when he was like 14, he woke up at 4 and did sport in the morning for many hours, and then when the creation of his first symphony happened, it was actually very badly criticized and he fell into a depression. That's actually fact, that's true. And in this depression he stopped his career and did bodybuilding and worked in a circus. So I was really surprised to discover this, and I found a picture of Rachmaninoff I will show here, where he's doing bodybuilding and lifting 4 people and everything. I thought that's funny, I never heard about this, and it's an astonishing thing in his biography. But then I came back to this website, read a bit more, and then I just was reading that this was the first April joke they made. So Rachmaninoff didn't do this because he was a tall man. That's why I thought he was maybe also a strong guy. So no, he was focusing on composing and conducting and playing piano most of the time. So let's see how this works. Also, the reason I'm having this clothes on actually is because Rachmaninoff, if you watch his pictures, always was kind of dressed like this. He was always in a 3-piece suit, Savile Row, like this London suit habits, very well dressed. He was also, fun fact I learned, he was a big fan of fast cars and speedboats, because he had this villa that I once visited on the Luzern Lake Lucerne, so it is Vierwaldstätter See. It's this strange formed lake in the middle of Switzerland. He had a very nice white villa, modern villa there, where he spent the last years of his life before he died in Los Angeles. And because for the story, Rachmaninoff actually is born in Russia. He was very happy living in Russia. Then he left for the revolution in 1870 something, I think. Let's check the facts. And never came back to Russia ever, and then started a career of concert pianist to earn money because he could not compose anymore. Then he lived in Switzerland, made concert in Switzerland, and discovered he really liked the country. And I think even he met Horowitz there, who showed him the neighborhood, and he liked it and then decided to live there. Or opposite, or Rachmaninoff showed Horowitz the Switzerland. Yeah, so Rachmaninoff was always dressed very very nice, like I'm like now. Yeah, about his practicing, so I read something about a student of him saying that he was hearing Rachmaninoff practice before he went for a lesson, I think. He didn't want to enter because he was hearing him practice and he was curious how Rachmaninoff would practice, and Rachmaninoff was practiced the 3rd etude of Chopin, this one, and apparently he was practicing it so slow that he almost didn't recognize the piece, and he chronometered the piece, so he was watching his watch, and he saw it took Rachmaninoff so long that he would play in 1 hour the etude 3 times through, very slow. So I think he was going something like, probably this speed or something. I'm familiar with practicing slow, but maybe not familiar to practicing that slow actually. And I think it makes sense to try this. I remember my teacher also told us about this practice method, and Liszt I think was doing this too, because my teacher was saying this was coming from Liszt and students of Liszt. So let's experiment this in a work of Rachmaninoff and see what happened. So I took my jacket off to practice. So let's see a piece of Rachmaninoff I'm practicing, and that I still need to practice it more. It's this first prelude in C sharp. So This was his most famous prelude and his most famous piece that people keep asking him all his life to play, and that he got tired playing after a while, and he even regret composing it because he was like just annoyed that people knew only this and didn't ask him anything else than this. He even apparently started improvising sometimes in this piece when people asked him to play in concert, and people were criticizing it, saying the composer can even not play his work himself because they didn't recognize the work since he was adding some notes. Typical of public, and very similar of what's happening on social media actually, when people criticize on social media, worth noticing. So the poor Rachmaninoff had for the history again, had composed very early, was a prodigy, entered the conservatory when he was 14, was recognized by Tchaikovsky, who said he would have a great career. He admired Tchaikovsky a lot, of course, also. And one of the teacher of Rachmaninoff, Siloti, was actually a student of Liszt, so probably some transmission there too of how to practice pieces, the repertoire and everything. And he composed very early. At 17 he finished his first concerto, had a quite success I think, and then he composed his first symphony, and this was conducted by Glazunov, who apparently was drunk on stage, and maybe the orchestra was not so good either, so the critic was very bad, and Rachmaninoff became completely depressed about this, and I think stopped composing for a while. He was very anxious, and I think it's interesting to notice that even such a genius, who actually get confirmation very early that he's very good, and who enters the big institutions very early, who have the most famous composer of the time saying he will have a great career, even with such thing behind him, he still doubts as soon as he gets something criticized badly, and gets anxious, afraid that he's not good enough. Also worth noticing that some artists, or most artists, has this kind of sensitivity where they doubt, or they're never happy with what they do, and I think Rachmaninoff was one of them. Chopin had this a bit too, also never happy with what he did, and so he then stopped composing, was really having a depression, and he went to a psychologist who helped him get out of his depression, but with hypnosis. And to thank him for this, he dedicated his second concerto that he then wrote again. It was his first work he wrote after his depression. And this second concerto, as we know, had a good success actually in his lifetime, and now today still, because that's the one everyone knows, right? It's the bells. Sound here, and I watched a documentary on Rachmaninoff, and they show these bells in Russia of the Orthodox Church, very heavy and present everywhere. Actually, we have this in Switzerland too. You have bells every hour, every 15 minutes. So this is something that, again, the character of Rachmaninoff, he really missed Russia. He was really attached emotionally to Russia and his culture, and when he had to leave, he was quite unhappy all his life and missing Russia all his life, his home country. And I think even he had a very good life in Russia because he had a big domain, new cars, the latest cars. He probably had a good earning too because he was buying the latest cars. But when he was in Switzerland or living abroad, actually had apparently a good life too, because this villa was very modern, big villa on the lakeside, which probably must be very expensive. I think now they sold the villa for around 20 million or something, so Swiss francs, around the same for US dollars. And he was buying, every time he bought the latest car, and then when a new car came out, the fastest car, he went to the dealer. The dealer took the car and he paid a bit up, and then took the newer car. And he also got passionate for boats because since he was on the lake, he was discovering probably boats, and he bought some speedboats. There are pictures of Rachmaninoff in his boat. It's quite funny to see. So yeah, interesting guy. He was interested in other stuff than music, which I always like to notice. He was interested in wearing nice suits, having nice cars, having nice boats, a nice villa. Was having a happy life, I think. A happy life, but he was strangely not seeming always quite unhappy. And then they always say he was not smiling on pictures. Well, actually, I mostly don't smile on pictures either, which doesn't mean I don't smile in real life. And apparently it was the same for him. You can see videos where he's smiling, but on pictures he was always very serious, so he got a bit noticed for this too. So about his practicing, let's see the prelude here. there he was young, and it sounds already very heavy and depressed and dark. You have this always also kind of bells again, but coming back theme always with this kind of going down, also the direction of the notes, and then this trying to go up but falling down all the time, this kind of this hope and this desperation there on the late notes. Then comes and actually I listened to Rachmaninoff recording of this period he's playing. It's very interesting always to listen how he plays his works, because the first thing I noticed is freedom. He's not very rhythmical what he's playing. He's taking a lot of freedom. He's always slowing down this and the last note even later. And then this always goes a bit faster, like it's trying to escape the temptation there. And this also goes always a bit fast. Then comes this middle part here. So that's the main motive of this piece, right? And then it's the whole thing fast. Here it's slowing down, so this is fast. Which is interesting, which also, like, I didn't thought when I first saw the score that you should really take some time here. I thought it was like a theme coming out but was not so important, and then when I heard the composer playing I thought, okay, he really wants this to come out as something important. It's also a reminder that you should really question the score a lot when you play something and try some stuff out and listen to how things come out. And mostly composers go for the beautiful things, not for the common or not interesting stuff, right? So if I would practice this like Rachmaninoff, what would bring me to go very slow here? So if I play it fast or in middle speed, I'm activating the reflex. So I'm not really thinking of which note I'm playing. The reflexes are integrated because I learned the piece. That's also a reason why if you start somewhere in the middle, most of the time you cannot, unless you really know the piece very well. And that's why it's also a test. Can I start here? Not really, actually. But I forgot this part now. So that's a good example that I still don't know the piece well enough. And that's where practicing slow will get interesting. Because if I do... not sure if it's this or this. I think, yeah, second time is this, right? So I think that's the point of practicing slow, is the things are so slow that your reflex doesn't work anymore, and you have to be conscious about every note you are playing, and you start questioning every note you are playing, which is the goal, because then if you question, you hesitate, and if you hesitate, you just realize that you don't know. And that's where you learn, right? You think, okay, this I didn't know, so this I need to learn. I need to know that here, second time it's this. It's C sharp, B, and it's E here. That's too fast. Even like, I know this, but which are the middle notes? These two. And then these two, and now I forgot the fingering. So there I would need to take the score and to really relearn the piece actually really slow. Something I should try actually, seriously. Because I'm mostly practicing thinking and practicing slow, but I just realized now that I'm actually practicing kind of middle tempo when I practice that. For example, I practice this Liszt etude, but was practicing lately like this, which I thought was slow, but there's still the reflex like kind of present. If I do, you will realize that as soon as you go slow enough, if you have to start to think about every single note separately. So he said, like, if you want to play fast, practice extremely slow, because in the concert you will do the opposite. You will play fast and think slow. Worth thinking. I didn't really get this, but I have to think about it. So yeah, that's Rachmaninoff practice. So another great piece of Rachmaninoff is his famous third piano concerto, which he actually composed also partly because of the critique he got of his second concerto, because even if it was kind of a success, he got some critics that this concerto was a kind of symphony with obligated piano or something like this. Well, anyway, like, I think we know now that even if you are the biggest genius on the planet, you get criticized by people, and even if you do the most famous and amazing work, composition, you will get critics anyway, which again refer to social media. Like, the critics is like something I don't really get, but yeah, doesn't matter. So his first piano concerto he wrote because he had a tour in US with orchestra. They actually asked him many times if he would tour in US, and I remember reading he didn't want to go to America, but they kept proposing him always more money, and he ended up saying, okay, fine, I will do it. And I think for the occasion that's when he wrote this third piano concerto. And if I remember correctly, it was also a bit to show, okay, look, you said my second concerto was too easy and was a symphony with piano. I will show you then I can write a serious, difficult piano concerto where the piano part is really heavy, and that's the third piano concerto. So it was probably a bit both, like for his own use to show his pianist possibilities and composer capacities in a concert tour in America, and also to respond to this critique of the second piano concerto. So this concerto is actually quite interesting. It's dedicated to Joseph Hoffmann, which was one of the most, or maybe the most pianist in Rachmaninoff time, with Horowitz, but Horowitz was younger. He dedicated to Hoffmann, and I think I just read lately that Hoffmann didn't like the concerto and actually never performed it. He performed other pieces from Rachmaninoff, so he liked Rachmaninoff, but Rachmaninoff played it to Hoffmann, and Hoffmann said, yeah, it's kind of a simple melody, constantly interrupted by the complicated parts, which it is, of course, but yeah, interesting that even some great pianists like Hoffmann would say something like this. It's the same with Tchaikovsky, you know, he was criticized writing his first piano concerto. He played it to Arthur Rubinstein, who was the cousin of Anton Rubinstein, who was director of Moscow Conservatory, or no, I think Anton Rubinstein was actually just a student of Liszt pianist, and Arthur Rubinstein, his cousin, was the director of Moscow Conservatory or St. Petersburg, I don't remember. And Tchaikovsky played to him, so to accomplished pianist, or Rubinstein played the concerto in a room together, and he said it's unplayable or something like this. And then we saw after that this was a big misjudgment of a famous musician or a very good musician. So same here, and actually what happened here, you have this three notes theme. So it's basically always based on these three notes. Later you have this. Start with this very theme where I said, like, a child could play the concerto, but then nobody can play the rest. And I forgot the... Then comes this kind of jazz beginning. And one of the big passages here. movement, beginning the famous, very complicated third movement, which is quite long. And by the way, Rachmaninoff is playing this concerto, and if you listen carefully, he's doing shortcuts. I think two places where he's just jumping to another places to make the piano concerto a bit shorter. And Horowitz is doing this too in some early recordings. He actually really liked Horowitz's recording and way to play it, that he even said to Horowitz that Horowitz played this concerto better than he did, that Rachmaninoff himself did, which is a huge compliment for a pianist when a composer is telling you play the piece better than himself. They were very friends, they had a kind of father-son relationship, they liked each other a lot, and Horowitz performed a lot of Rachmaninoff, and he performed the third piano concerto for his final exam at the conservatory, I think, which was one of the first to play, he needed to play it. Yeah, so interesting composer, interesting history, did a lot of concerts. His orchestral work are really interesting too. He's like symphonic poems or the Isle of the Dead, where again you see this obsession with this dark side, this dead stuff, like death in himself. He died in Los Angeles. So to recap the whole thing, so Rachmaninoff was starting to, not maybe every day because he had concert tours and I don't think it's a daily habit, but there is one day described where he's composing from 9 to 12:30. He's writing his friends that it's now 12:30 and he had only 3 hours to compose this morning and it was not enough. And now he say he has 1 hour free, so from 12:30 to 1:30 to write this friend, and actually he would prefer to compose than to write to his friend, but he had to do it. Then he says he has like 2 hours of piano practice, and this was enough for him to practice 2 hours. Find it astonishing, but yeah, probably he knew stuff by heart quite fast and he didn't have to practice on technique so much. So he was probably doing the slow practice a lot. And actually I played once in Edinburgh, and there I met a guy who told me his grandfather, so it was an old guy who told me his grandfather once met Rachmaninoff after a concert, and he wanted to meet Rachmaninoff after the concert, so he went in the loge and he was listening behind the door, or it was before the concert. He wanted to meet Rachmaninoff before, so he went and he heard piano sounds, so he was listening carefully, and then he realized that the guy was just repeating the same measure over and over again, like more than 40 times. And then he knocked on the door and Rachmaninoff said yes, and he asked Rachmaninoff why such a great pianist like you are repeating the same thing over and over. And Rachmaninoff said to him, authentic, so that's someone who told me, that he said, practicing piano you have to repeat stuff so much that you will need to decide to do a mistake to make one. So you need to know the thing so well that you need to decide to make a mistake to make one, which shows his obsession with perfection, with knowing the thing over and over, like knowing the thing through, and that is just getting impossible to make a mistake because you repeat it so much. So this was a small stuff that I learned from someone who met Rachmaninoff. Yeah, then his 2 hours practice, and then he went for a walk 1 hour, which was important for him apparently to walk. I can understand, like if you live on the lake of Lucerne, walks are very refreshing and maybe helps you have new ideas. So let's say he finished at 5:30 something, and then he said he still have 4 hours time to compose because he went to sleep not too late. So his days was busy with practicing 2 hours piano and composing around 7-8 hours. And he complained having not time enough to compose because he wanted probably to compose more stuff. And actually you can see also Rachmaninoff don't has a huge work. He does not like Liszt or something, where because he was probably also busy touring a lot, conducting and practicing and playing concerts, piano recitals or piano concertos with orchestra. Yeah, interesting guy. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and as I said, I have one on Liszt, Chopin and Mozart that you can watch. Actually, it's on my YouTube channel. I will maybe do some other if I find some interesting composers here in the book, and looking forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye!